Have you ever heard of the museum that doesn't want visitors? No, I'm not speaking in riddles. There's a place in the city that exists, but only at night. Not on maps. Not in blogs. Not even in the memories of those who drive past it daily. A building that refuses to be remembered. They call it the Midnight Museum, and it's where my nightmare began. Tell me, have you ever fed a gargoyle at 1:13 a.m.? Or followed a hallway where the footsteps behind you matched your own step for step, breath for breath? I have. And I'm still here to tell you why that might have been a mistake. When I got the job at the city's museum, I didn't question why they were hiring for the night shift. I needed the money, and honestly, I didn't mind the idea of spending my evenings in silence. In fact, I preferred it. No ringing phones. No angry customers. Just me, a flashlight, and a few centuries of dust. The job came through a classified site I don't even remember browsing. The listing was vague: night security needed. Discreet position. Immediate start. It felt peculiar. But my rent was 3 weeks overdue, and peculiar pays the same as normal. When I showed up, the museum looked exactly like what you'd expect in a horror movie, the kind of building the camera slowly pans toward while the music grows colder. It was a Gothic stone structure buried in an alleyway between forgotten bookshops and boarded-up antique stores. Iron gates, mossy walls, windows like dead eyes. No banners. No signs. No life. Inside, it smelled like wet parchment and something faintly metallic, like dried blood. I met Mr. Harlan, the curator. He looked like he had grown out of the museum walls, tall, gaunt, skin papery thin. His handshake was firm, but there was no warmth in it, just obligation. "You're punctual," he said. "That's good. Time is very important around here." He handed me a sheet of yellowed paper. It looked older than the museum itself, corners curling, words typed on a typewriter long dead. The title read, "Rules for the Midnight Museum." He told me to read them carefully. And I did. I read them aloud now, so you can understand how madness sounds when it's disguised as procedure. Rule number 1. Do not let anyone in after the doors are locked at 11 p.m. No exceptions. Rule number 2. Check the paintings in the East Wing every hour. If any have changed, call Mr. Harlan immediately. Rule number 3. At exactly 1:13 a.m., feed the gargoyle in the courtyard a coin. Any coin will do. Rule number 4. Do not look directly at the mannequin in the Victorian exhibit. Keep it in your peripheral vision only. Rule number 5. If you hear footsteps behind you in the main hall, do not turn around. Continue walking. Rule number 6. The lights in the ancient artifact room may flicker. If they turn red, leave the room and lock the door behind you. Rule number 8. Never sit in a chair that wasn't there before. Rule number 9. Don't go anywhere you don't remember heading toward, or feel pulled to. If you hear yourself from a place you are not, do not respond. It is lonely. And it is learning. Rule number 10. If you see a mirror, don't stare. Don't try to fix it. If your reflection doesn't show in 5 seconds, walk away. If something else shows up, walk faster. Rule number 11. If you're given a performance review at night, don't argue. Don't speak. Accept it and stay still. Rule number 12. If the painting calls to you, do not turn around. If it asks to be seen, cover your eyes. If it begins to move, run, whether your legs agree or not. Rule number 13. There's no lady inside. If you hear her voice, it's already too late, you belong to the museum. I let out a dry laugh. Is this some kind of initiation prank? Mr. Harlan didn't blink. He didn't smirk. His voice was flat and steady, like someone who's given up trying to be understood. These rules are not a joke. Break even one, and this place will show you things you're not meant to see. He said that last part softly, almost like a confession. I nodded slowly, but a chill rippled down my spine. the kind of chill your instincts send when your brain is too arrogant to run. "You'll be alone," he added, "but not entirely." Then he turned and walked away, his footsteps swallowed by the velvet carpet. That night, I sat in the security office holding the list in trembling fingers. The halls were quiet, the museum asleep, but I wasn't. Every tick of the antique clock on the wall felt like a heartbeat. The first hour was quiet. Too quiet. Not peaceful, predatory. Like the walls themselves were waiting for something. At 12:07 a.m., I made my first round. I moved through each wing slowly, my flashlight the only source of light cutting through the thick, oppressive dark. The exhibits stared back at me with blank, dusty faces, old bones under glass, taxidermy birds frozen mid-screech, swords that hadn't drawn blood in centuries. Then I reached the east wing. A long corridor of oil paintings. Portraits of nobles, clergy, military commanders. Each one with eyes that were almost too detailed. Their gazes followed me as I passed, their stares tinged with contempt. No, that's not the right word. Hunger. I checked each painting, just like the rules said. Nothing seemed out of place until the fifth frame on the left. It was a woman in red, mid-1800s, hair pinned high, lips curved in a faint smile. I swear, in the corner of her mouth, something had changed. Her smile was a little wider. I shook it off. Just nerves. A trick of the light. I moved on. At exactly 1:12 a.m., I stepped into the courtyard. The cold hit harder out there. The air was heavy, like fog made of iron. In the center stood the gargoyle, a hunched stone creature perched atop a pedestal, wings folded, mouth open in a frozen snarl. It was ugly and beautiful in the way nightmares are, detailed, expressive, ancient. I remembered the third rule. At exactly 1:13 a.m., feed the gargoyle in the courtyard a coin. Any coin will do. I pulled a tarnished old coin from my pocket and waited. The minute hand ticked forward. 1:13. I dropped the coin into its mouth. And the courtyard shifted. Not visually, audibly. Like the sound around me warped. The birds in the trees stopped chirping. The distant hum of the city vanished. Even the wind seemed to go silent. Then, a faint rumble. As if the stone creature was purring. I didn't wait around. I turned and walked back inside. Back in the office, I stared at the rule sheet again. Why coins? Why 113? Why did the museum behave like it was alive? I didn't know yet. But something inside me whispered that the rules weren't just guidelines. They were rituals. Offerings. Bargains. And I had just made my first one. At 1:46 a.m., I had just left the Egyptian exhibit when I heard them. Footsteps behind me. Heavy and deliberate. Mimicking mine perfectly. I stopped. They stopped. I took a slow step forward. Another pair echoed behind me. Same rhythm. Same pace. My throat tightened. Rule number 5 flashed in my mind. If you hear footsteps behind you in the main hall, do not turn around. Continue walking. So I walked. Slowly. Through that massive, marble-floored hall. Past statues of Roman emperors with broken noses and Greek goddesses missing arms. The footsteps stayed behind me the entire time, breathing in my rhythm, walking in my shadow. It was the longest 30 seconds of my life. I reached the other side and opened the door to the west wing. The footsteps didn't follow. I turned around. No one was there. I kept walking. Eventually, I reached the Victorian exhibit. And there it stood. Rule 4's nightmare. Do not look directly at the mannequin in the Victorian exhibit. Keep it in your peripheral vision only. A tall mannequin dressed in morning black, lace gloves, a veil over her pale face, standing beside a fake coffin. I kept my eyes on the floor, only catching her outline from the corner of my eye. But as I passed her, she moved. Just slightly. A twitch in the hand. A tilt of the head. Still, I didn't look. Because something deep in my gut told me that if I met her eyes, she'd move forever. I made it back to the office. My hands were shaking. I wasn't sure if I had done everything right, but I was still breathing. Then I saw it. A piece of parchment resting on my desk. It wasn't there before. It read. One rule was nearly broken. Be careful. The museum notices. There was no signature. Just a crimson wax seal, still warm to the touch. Oh my God, I breathed, over and over. My legs gave out. I tried to sit. Just rest a bit. I hadn't broken any rules, yet. The footsteps, the gargoyle, the mannequin, everything had obeyed the pattern, as if the museum wanted me to learn. But then my eyes grew heavy. I hadn't noticed how exhausted I was. Just 5 minutes, I told myself. The office chair was cold, the silence absolute. I closed my eyes. That's when the breathing started. It wasn't my own breath. No, it was closer. Wetter. Shallower. Like something with lungs far too small was right in front of me. I snapped awake and the lights were off. I hadn't turned them off. I never sleep with the lights off. The room was pitch black, but I could still feel it. Something was in there with me. A whisper rose from the darkness. It wasn't words, exactly. It was the suggestion of a voice. Breathy. Malicious. Familiar. You almost broke rule number 7. I bolted upright and grabbed my flashlight, flicking it on, nothing. No one was there. But on the wall across from me, something had been written in faint condensation. Never sleep inside the museum. I checked the rule sheet again. I hadn't noticed that one before, it was scribbled on the back in frantic handwriting. Rule number 7. Do not fall asleep. Not even for a minute. If you do, do not speak to the thing that wakes you. I hadn't spoken. I hoped that was enough. And, suddenly, as if summoned by fear itself, the emergency lights in the ancient artifact room started blinking red. I wasn't sure what triggered it. There were no sensors, no storms, no power failures. Still, red light flooded the hallway. I remembered the guideline that was in the printed rules. If the red lights turn on between 3 o'clock and 3:15 a.m., go to the ancient artifact room and whisper your name backwards. Do not forget your own name. If you do, it will be replaced. It sounded ridiculous. But after everything that had happened, I didn't question it. I walked down the long hallway, red pulses lighting the display cases like a heartbeat. I stood in front of the oldest artifact, a bowl of obsidian fragments believed to be pre-Sumerian. No one knew what it had been used for. I knelt. I whispered my name backwards. Exactly as instructed. The lights stopped blinking. But something answered. It came from the obsidian bowl. Not out loud, in my mind. A voice, like breaking mirrors, said, "You remember. So you are still you. For now." My skin went ice cold. I felt watched from every direction, like the glass cases had eyes. The door behind me creaked open. I turned my head, just slightly, and saw nothing. But in the reflection of the obsidian bowl, there was a man standing behind me. Completely still. Wearing a registrar's coat. Only, the museum hasn't had a registrar in 20 years. I ran. Not a brave walk. Not a fast jog. I ran back to the office, slamming the door behind me. I sat down, out of breath, and found another note. Same parchment. Same red seal. This one read, "They are impressed. But do not grow arrogant. The museum loves the clever. But it feasts on the proud." And then, scratched into the wood of the desk beneath it, "You've been seen." I was afraid to even blink now. The museum was no longer testing me, it was toying with me. Everything seemed quiet again. Too quiet. That's when I remembered the mirror. Not just any mirror. The mirror with no reflection. They'd also warned me about it during training. Don't look too long. Don't try to fix it. If your reflection doesn't appear within 5 seconds, walk away. If something else appears, walk faster. At first, I thought it was a myth. Now, I had to find out for myself. I made my way toward the East Wing, toward an exhibit no guest was ever allowed to see. The Hall of Forgotten Faces. A collection of antique mirrors from cultures that don't exist on any map. I passed at least a dozen strange glass panels until I reached the one in the center. Tall, silver-framed and dull. No dust. No reflection. Just cold emptiness. I stood there. 5 seconds. Nothing. Then, on the 6th second, something moved. But it wasn't me. It tilted its head slowly. Its shape was like mine, but not quite. Shoulders too wide. Eyes too far apart. In its grin, it was grinning before I even felt afraid. "You've looked too long," it said without moving its lips. I stepped back. Too late. I ran. But not before seeing something in the corner of the glass. My reflection. Catching up. I didn't stop running until I reached the basement stairwell. I didn't mean to go there. I didn't even remember heading in that direction. But I heard a voice down there. My own voice calling out. "Hey! Come down here." I dropped my keys. "I need help." I froze. I was standing at the top of the stairs. The voice below matched my pitch, tone, even my hesitation. But I was very much upstairs. So who, or what was mimicking me from below? Another rule clicked in my mind. If you hear yourself from a place you are not, do not respond. It is lonely. And it is learning. I backed away slowly. The voice called again. "You're supposed to help me. You said you would." Still my voice. "Come on, James. We don't have much time." I never said my name aloud. As I backed away, the lights flickered. A loud chime rang out through the museum speakers. Once. Twice. 3 times. That was not normal. Then a voice I hadn't heard before, flat, mechanical, museum-like, announced. "Commencing, silence test. 3:40 a.m. to 3:50 a.m. No sound above 30 decibels is permitted." That's a whisper. A soft one. If I made a noise louder than a breath, I didn't want to know what would happen. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out slowly. An alert. Do not breathe heavily. Do not drop this device. Do not panic. I stood still in the hallway. Not breathing. Not blinking. Then, of course, a statue fell in the next room. Loud. Crashing. Bone-breaking loud. But it wasn't me. Still, the silence test didn't care. The air grew denser. Heavier. Like gravity had tripled. From the shadows down the hall, something slid forward. Not walked. Slid. A tall figure in black. No feet. No face. Only long arms and a golden tuning fork in its hand. Every few seconds, it would strike the fork against the wall. Then turn. Listening. Searching. I had to stay absolutely still. But my heart was pounding so loudly, I thought it might count as a scream. At 3:48 a.m. It stopped. Right in front of me. Inches away. The tuning fork glowed slightly. It tilted its head. As if listening to my thoughts. Then, just as suddenly, it vanished. The speaker announced. Silence test complete. Resume movement. Resume breath. I collapsed to the floor. I didn't even realize I'd been holding my breath the entire time. And just then, another note. Folded under my foot. You're halfway through. But now, the doors begin to unlock. Halfway. Only halfway. And the worst part. The museum was just beginning to wake up. At 4 a.m. The museum creaked again, but this time, it wasn't just the wind. It was intentional. Something was unlocking. Not just any door. The one that should never be opened. I was standing near the east corridor when I heard it, the slow, metallic scrape of bolts turning on their own. At first, I didn't want to look. But I had to. That door hadn't opened in 14 years. It didn't even have a handle. No hinges. No label. Just a small brass plate etched with one word. Never. And yet, it was open now. Just a crack. But enough for the air around it to turn icy cold. I took a few careful steps closer, keeping my flashlight low. Inside was darkness. Darker than anything I'd ever seen. Not just absence of light, it felt like the absence of space itself. The flashlight refused to cut through it. Its beam just stopped. And then, from inside the dark, a whisper. Not threatening. Not angry. Sorrowful. Almost pleading. Close the door. Please. Close it before she sees you. I tried. I swear I tried to push it shut. But my hands went through the door. They passed through as if it were made of mist. She's not supposed to wake up. You shouldn't be here. None of us should be. That voice, it wasn't just in my ears. It was in my chest. I turned to run. But my feet wouldn't move. It was like I was standing in molasses, every muscle frozen except for my eyes. And in that exact moment, I felt her wake up. No sound. No announcement. Just a shift in air pressure. A feeling like the building had suddenly leaned closer to me. Then, the tiniest of sounds. Click. A single fingernail. Tapping against glass. She was inside. There was a painting in that room. Oil on canvas. Huge. Victorian. Frame covered in dust and iron vines. No one remembered what it depicted anymore, because no one dared look. But now, as I stood frozen, I was being dragged toward it. Not physically, mentally. It started as a whisper in the back of my thoughts. Turn your head. Just once. Just peek. But I knew better. Another rule. If the painting calls to you, do not turn around. If it asks to be seen, cover your eyes. If it begins to move, run, whether your legs agree or not. I covered my eyes with one hand and turned away. But I heard it anyway. Brushstrokes shifting. Canvas stretching like skin. It was trying to become real. Then I heard footsteps. Sharp. Rhythmic. High heels. But they were coming from inside the room. And that didn't make sense, the floor was carpeted. She wasn't stepping on this floor. She was stepping on something else, and the sound was just echoing into my world. She got closer. And then, she spoke. You're the only one who stayed. So you'll be the one who remembers. Her voice had no age. It wasn't old. It wasn't young. It was timeless. And it hurt to hear. I don't know what she did. Maybe she opened her mouth. Maybe it was the painting. But suddenly, the sound that burst out was not human. It shattered every bulb in the corridor. Glass rained down like sharp confetti. I fell to my knees, clutching my ears. But I noticed something odd. My ears weren't bleeding. My nose was. The sound was shaking me from the inside out. Then, a burst of wind, cold and dry. It sucked all the oxygen from the hallway. And just like that, silence. The door began to close by itself. Slowly. With a final hiss. And that's when I saw it. Just before it sealed shut. There was a set of eyes, human. Tearful. Trapped inside. But they weren't hers. They belonged to someone else. Another guard? Maybe. The old curator? I'll never know. I always thought they were victims of something ancient, or cruel. But then I started to wonder, who would do that? And more importantly, why? As I stumbled backward, my phone buzzed violently in my pocket. A new notification. Emergency lock override initiated. The museum has deemed you a threat. I blinked. My hands shook. What did that mean? Me? A threat? I had followed all the rules. Except one. I stayed. I listened. I heard her voice. Which means it was already too late. Because once you hear her, you belong to the museum. However, there's one rule they didn't bother explaining. The one they forgot to add, the one that should be underlined, twice. Do not go to the roof. They didn't said anything. Didn't say what's up there. But someone must have warned that if you hear footsteps going up the staircase toward it, don't follow. If the roof door creaks open by itself, pretend it's not real. If something calls your name from above, ignore it. But now the only door left unlocked in the entire building was the one to the roof. I tried to avoid it. I really did. I stayed in the lower halls, tracing my steps back to the lobby. But something was wrong. No matter which direction I walked, no matter how many left or right turns, the hallway began to bend. Not just metaphorically. The floor literally tilted under my shoes. And the walls? They started to lean, just slightly, toward the ceiling, as if folding upward. Until I found myself standing at the staircase. The one that leads up to the roof. I wasn't the first one. I heard the steps before I even placed my foot on the bottom stair. It sounded heavy, wet, and dragging. It didn't feel like normal walking. No, it was more like sliding. Someone, or something, was already going up. But there was no one visible on the steps. Only wet footprints. Bare feet. Wide. Too wide. They were left behind on the concrete as if the body wasn't solid, but soaked through. And then the smell hit. It was the stench of rotten flowers. Lilies. Faintly perfumed, but decayed. The scent of an old funeral. By the time I reached the top, I was trembling. The door, solid iron, rusted and locked for years, was wide open. And the sky? The sky was wrong. It wasn't night anymore. But it wasn't morning either. It was gray. As if the stars had all burned out, and the sun never woke up. I stepped out. The wind hit me instantly. But it wasn't cold. It was empty. Not a breeze. Not a gust. Just pure emptiness brushing against skin like a forgotten breath. And in the center of the rooftop, a chair. Wooden and weather-worn. Facing nothing. But someone was sitting in it. He didn't move. Didn't speak. He just sat there. A man in a faded security uniform. One I'd never seen before. His badge was worn. But I caught the name, Ellis. Ellis was the name of the night guard who vanished in 1997. He looked peaceful. Except, he wasn't breathing. His lips didn't part. But I heard his voice. Inside my skull. Not in words. Not in sound. Just meaning. The museum wants you now. You've stayed too long. It remembers you. My knees buckled. The wind rose. Ellis began to disintegrate, slowly, like dust dissolving into moonlight. He didn't flinch. Didn't blink. Just looked forward. And as he vanished, the chair stayed behind. Still warm. Still waiting. I turned around, ready to run. But the sky had changed. It was no longer gray. Now, letters were forming in the clouds. Black streaks across the heavens, spelling out My name. Over and over. Like a scream, burned in silence. Then the whispers came. All around me. Sit. 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 I covered my ears. I fell to the ground. I shut my eyes. And when I opened them, the chair was empty again. But now, there were two. One where Ella sat, and one next to it. As I backed toward the door, I noticed something strange about my shadow. It was no longer matching my movements. It lagged behind. It turned its head when I didn't. It raised its arms when mine were still. It smiled. And then it whispered in my own voice. You're almost done. Just one more hour. But we never leave empty-handed. I turned and ran. Down the stairs. Back into the museum. The roof door slammed shut. Locks clicked into place. I never touched them. And the final thing I saw before descending into the last hour? That second chair on the roof. Had someone new sitting in it. Me. Or a version of me. Staring upward. Smiling. Waiting. I glanced at the clock, 5 a.m. You'd think that would bring relief. But the truth is, the last hour is the worst. The museum doesn't want you here anymore. But it also won't let you leave unless something stays behind. And right now, that something is me. I ran. Back down the staircase. I avoided the chairs, avoided the mirrors, and didn't dare say my name out loud. But no matter where I turned, the footsteps followed. Not the echo of my own. These were half a beat late. Like someone mimicking me, from just behind. I tested it. I stopped. They didn't. I turned, nothing was there. But from that moment on, the footsteps never stopped again. Even when I stood perfectly still. They kept walking. I reached a corridor I hadn't seen before. It shouldn't have existed. Not in the museum's layout. It was narrow and claustrophobic, the walls almost brushing against my shoulders. There were no windows, no exhibits, just whispering. Low, urgent, and constant. Thousands of voices, all speaking at once. All saying the same thing. Give it back. Give it back. Give it back. Back? What did they want back? What did I take? I clutched my coat, felt through my pockets, grabbed my phone, all empty. I had nothing. At least, nothing I could see. But something in my chest felt heavier. Like I was carrying someone else's memory. A secret. And the museum wanted it returned. I made it back to the West Wing. To that cursed mirror. I know, it wasn't a sane decision. But I had to do something, anything. Only now, the mirror was shattered. Except for one shard, still mounted, still glowing faint blue. And this time, it showed me everything. Not just my face. But a timeline of me. Versions of myself wandering the museum. Different outfits. Different expressions. Each one fading out, disappearing, after 6 a.m. All but one. One version stayed. Sitting in a corner. Eyes wide open. Mouth sewn shut. Forever stuck at 5:59. That's when the realization hit me. This museum. It's a machine. It takes people in. Let them wander. Let them remember. Let them hear things they're not supposed to. And at the end, it doesn't let them go, unless something replaces them. I had to trade something. But what? A memory? A truth? A name? I whispered one thing into the air. I know the secret. Instantly, the whispers stopped. The footsteps paused. The walls relaxed. And the main hall door? Unlocked. I could see it. The exit. The outside world. The dark purple sky softening at the edges. Almost morning. I took a step forward, and the air got thicker. Like walking through molasses. Like something didn't want me to go. Like something was coming with me. I looked behind me. No footsteps. But a figure stood in the shadows. My size. My shape. My face. Except, it had no eyes. Just two hollow spaces, glowing faintly from within. It nodded. As if giving permission. Or asking for it. The museum whispered again. Just one sentence this time. Only one version of you may leave. I had to choose. Me? Or the hollow-eyed shadow. If I left now, without looking back, it would take my place. It would carry my memory. It would be forgotten by the world. But I'd be free. But if I turned back, if I reached out, I'd stay. And no one would ever know. I took a step forward. The shadow raised its hand. Waved. Mimicking me, exactly like those footsteps. And I walked through the front door. I was out. Cold air hit my skin. Streetlights buzzed softly. The sky was lightening, morning was coming. But something was off. The world felt thinner. My phone had no signal. The streets were empty. Not just quiet, vacant. Like I'd stepped into a copy of the outside, not the real thing. Even the traffic lights blinked on random colors. And the museum behind me? No longer there. No towering building. No grand entrance. Just a brick wall. No door. No glass. No sign it had ever existed at all. I checked my wallet. No ID. No cards. Just a single folded note. Written in my own handwriting. You made it out. But not all of you. I touched my chest. It still felt heavy. Like I was carrying something. But I didn't remember what. Or who. Or why. Only one thing was clear, I wasn't alone inside my own head anymore. Cars returned. Shops opened. People walked past me like I was just another face in the crowd. But I noticed something in every reflection. Shop windows. Puddles. Polished marble. Behind me, the shadow was still there. Still waving. Still smiling. Just waiting. The light changed. Birds began to chirp. The museum, if it ever existed, was gone. Just gone. And so was the weight in my chest. But a new one formed in my thoughts. A question I couldn't shake. What did I give up? I felt emptier. But freer. As if a story had been written inside me, and then ripped out. The world was golden again. The warmth, the safety, the peace of the world outside the museum. But the museum still called me. I knew it. It would always call. And I was no longer afraid of museums. But I never entered one again. Because I couldn't risk it. What if another one remembered me? What if they asked for their memory back? And worse, what if they didn't let me leave next time? A piece of who I was. A memory I can't even name, but that I now know is missing. It's like a part of me is floating in the ether, just out of reach. Not just a memory. Not just a feeling. But a core of myself, the very thing that made me, me. I don't know what it was, but I can feel its absence in the way my hands move now, in the way I look at the world, as if I'm seeing it through someone else's eyes. I know it's gone. I can't remember it, but I know it's gone. And every time I look in the mirror, I see it, the shadow of who I used to be, always standing behind me, a step too far, always a step too far from my reach. I can't go back. I can't risk it. What if the next one remembers me? What if it asks for more than a memory? What if the price is something I can't bear to lose? No. I will never enter another museum again. Because, if I do, I might not be able to leave.